Now, it didn't give me an option to record to the cloud, which kind of scares me. So, um, Terry said that he will be providing a slide deck, and be able to link to that and view it that way too. So that's very, very generous of him. So we'll get right into our program today. A lot of us have been involved in HamSCI, some for a short time, some for a very long time. And one of the funny things is, my neighbors ask me, they say, "Hey, you're retired. What do you do for fun in your spare time?" I said, "Oh, me and a lot of my friends like to study space weather." And they kind of look at me, and they understand the space part. Ever since Sputnik, people know what's up in space. They understand weather. Of course, they're thinking about terrestrial weather, but I really don't think they understand space weather. But there are obviously a lot of good reasons to study it, some technical. But I think today you're going to learn from Dr. Terry Griffin of Kansas State, who's actually a degreed economist, going to explain why there's a lot of parts of our lives that are affected by space weather. And as Terry said earlier, I think we owe his connection to Tamitha Scove. She put Terry in touch with Nathaniel, who put him in touch with me, and so on and so forth. And here we are today. So Terry, we'll turn it over to you. I think you said there's going to be some back and forth with the group in addition to taking some questions. So we'll let you go ahead and get started. I'll mute
Yeah,
myself.
we'll definitely have a conversation, and yeah, it's great to be here. I did see someone, there may be two Tamithas in the world, but I do see one of them on the list today that's here. So if there's any physics questions, I'll punt those to Tamitha. So I'm here in Kansas, and I work in ag technology. So going back to the 1990s, I evaluated how farmers are using GPS. And over time, we started saying GNSS to be more generic for the other systems around the world, GLONASS and Galileo and so forth. I have degrees in agronomy, which is crop science, but my grad degrees are in economics. And I study how farmers make decisions, okay? So um, space weather impacts all of us in many different ways. And the sun, it's a 93 million miles away. And one of the things I think about is forecasting. And we can make rain forecasts better than we can make space weather forecasts. I think that's kind of understood. Um, but one of the things, can you see my slides? I hope. Okay. Thumbs up. Cool. Is that even from L1, the new SWIFO satellites that NOAA and NASA launched in August, September, they just now reached L1, which is about 1 million miles away, and those things give us maybe 45 minutes heads up, which is great. In my world, I need to know not only if space weather is going to affect GPS, but I need to know how long it's going to last. So if we're experiencing a GNSS outage, how long does this outage last? And when will it be over? Okay. I didn't mention it. Last year, I was appointed to the White House Office of Science, Technology Policy. They call it SWAG, Space Weather Advisory Group. So I represent end users from agriculture, construction, mining, drilling, and I added geocachers to the list because this one of the things I do with my family that requires GNSS to be operational, and I think it resonates with a lot more people. From Kansas, the last couple of years since May 10th, we've been seeing Aurora, Northern Lights. And this is my little girl on the left and the same location here on the right a few months later in 2025. Here's me one evening, and you may ask, Griffin, are you a Aurora chaser? Like, no, sometimes I'll walk down to my mailbox, and if the dog wakes me up in the middle of the night, I'll go and see if there's an Aurora, which is what's happening right here. And I use my cell phone to take some selfies with it. I'm not a chaser. I do enjoy seeing them. And I'll tell you more about the first time I saw Aurora and encourage you to think about it. When was the first time you saw the Aurora Borealis or the Aurora Australis for those of you who have been to Antarctica? So in agriculture, I'm going to slow down a little bit and spend a little bit more time on the details here. Okay. This is a really good publication that some of my friends and I put up 3 years ago, 3 years ago this month. Jonathan, Eric, and I tapped into the USDA survey of farmers, and there's lots of questions in these surveys that farmers respond to. And this particular one that's on the left is what proportion of planted acres are have GPS or GNSS systems for guidance. When I say guidance, you can think of it as automated steering. There's usually a person in the cab, but as long as they don't interact with the steering wheel, the machine can make parallel passes through the field using GNSS systems. If you want to read more about this, there's a QR code that you can scan, and I'm going to distribute the slides, or I've already sent them to Gary and Mary Lou. Mary Lou, you've got the slides in your email. Please feel free to distribute however you want. But there's a QR code as well as a link. But take a look at this. So about the year 2000, and that's when President Clinton signed away the selective availability, if you remember that, in May 2000, that made GPS a lot more accurate. But it was still in its infancy on the farm at that time. And over time, more and more farmers are using it. Roughly 2/3 of the planted acres in the United States have GPS guidance. Okay, so keep that in mind. We'll swing back to this information in a minute. Why is that important? Well, the image on the left here is from 1995. Let's say use physical row markers so that farms could make parallel passes with planting equipment. And after GNSS became available for civilian uses, this 2005 image, and this is actually from Australia, this is allowing parallel passes without physical row markers such that you could skip passes and it's easier to turn around on the end of the field. You don't have to back up 3 or 4 times, okay? So it's a logistical thing. Well, the engineers like, now that we don't have to put these flimsy row markers on the ends of the planters, how big can we make these planters? So imagine in 2015, or the image on the top, trying to make parallel passes with these machines without computerized satellite enabled guidance systems. Okay, it'd be nearly impossible. Okay, you can still put seed in the ground in many cases, but it's really important for placement to control the wide and narrow middles between the two passes. So because of GNSS, we became bigger and bigger equipment, but that means that we are now reliant upon GNSS in order to put seed in the ground. Okay? I promise you, we're going to take another look at this chart. Look at the shape of this, okay? I'm not going to superimpose this on something that you probably are more familiar with, and that's the sunspot cycle. And we're going to look at this over time, okay? And this is going to be from the year 2000 to the present, to me, is the precision agricultural era. You can even think of it as the GNSS era, because precision ag relies upon GPS in order to be precision, to be precise. A long time ago, not really in geologic time, but in 1859, there was an event. Two astronomers, Carrington was one of them, saw white light flare on the sun. About 18 hours later, people in the Caribbean were seeing northern lights. Okay, telephone operators were being shocked. They tell me telegraphs worked without batteries. And so this Carrington event is expected to happen every 150, 200 years. Okay? So the question is, if that happened today, what would it do to ham radio operators? What would it do to electrical grid? What would it do to satellites we have in orbit? Okay? Doesn't make them better, I'll tell you that. And if you watch the news about space weather, they're always comparing this, the current event to, is this a Carrington class event? And that seems to be, the first question a lot of journalists want to ask. So this chart, I stare at this way too much, okay? And I know there's a lot of stuff going on, but this is a timeline going back to 1932. Okay? The green dots are daily sunspot numbers, counts, and the green same colors. Green line is the 13-month rolling average for sunspot numbers. Okay, so this is the number of sunspots. It's very cyclical. We can see that. On average, from peak to peak, it's about 11 years. Okay, so the sun does this cycle every 11 years. You may want to think about it as every 22 years. The vertical purple bars, what are these? Well, that's a day that has a geomagnetic disturbance. And I measure this with KP. I'm sure that ham radio operators are very familiar with KP indices. So I set this to be KP greater than or equal to 8. So these are the number of days in purple that had a day with a KP of 8 or greater. Back in, Gary, you mentioned Sputnik. When was that, 1959? During solar cycle 19. And that was pretty active geomagnetic disturbances back then. And these are numbered, solar cycle 1 was when we as a society started counting them, 1750, I believe. Today we're in solar cycle 25, and that's the 25th solar cycle since we started counting. A few other details here. This red line, this is what I told you I was going to bring in from the Precision Ag Survey. This is the percent of planted acres that corn farms have with GNSS guidance systems. Okay, this is the precision agriculture era. Notice anything interesting about this timeline, in particular this solar cycle. Pretty quiet in solar cycle 24. We didn't have any days with KP of 9. And so back in 2000, 2005, when we had some days with geomagnetic disturbances, but we didn't have that many GPS acres out there, still in the infancy. So when May 10th rolled around last year in 2024, almost 2 years now, it proved something to a lot of people who never would have thought that sunspots could be correlated to farmers being able to put seed in the ground. Okay, and we're going to talk more about that. This link, this is on my website. If you would like to see this same chart, but see what it would look like at KP of 9 or KP greater than 6, I created an interactive dashboard for you to be able to do that. And this is it. You can scan the QR code here as well. I've got it set to go no lower than 4, because if you go lower than 4, it's going to be a solid purple curtain. But you can go from 4 to the max of 9, and by default, it's at 6. President Clinton turned off selective availability on May 1st, 2000, in this vertical green line, kind of a before and after the GNSS era. But it's kind of a fun little website to play with. It makes a good point about solar cycle 24 being abnormally quiet. And the space weather scientists tell me that solar cycle 25 isn't necessarily overly active. It's just more normal than what we've been used to in recent memory. So a few more things about this timeline. So I was not born in 1967. But the thing I'd like to start off with, on this day in May, all my grandparents and parents nearly died. Okay? When was that? The Cold War almost went nuclear because of space weather. So both sides thought the other was messing with their communication systems. Okay? Thankfully, the Air Force stepped in and cleared that up. I will mention something too. I got her name circled. DJ Knip, that's Dolores. Dolores published this, and you'll see her name pop up again. This day in 1972, underwater detonations. Well, off the coast of north of Vietnam, underwater mines detonated due to space weather. And again, Dolores was the one writing about this. In 1989, electricity in Quebec City went out. for a couple of days in town in the country area. In the rural areas, it was days, weeks before they got everything.
Almost the whole province went out of electricity.
So it wasn't just the city; it was the whole province.
No. It was a big part of the province. It knocked down the electrical grid here.
And that's pretty severe, right?
It was.
Thank you. In November 1991, I was harvesting rice from Northeast Arkansas, which is pretty far south. Think of Memphis, is right outside Memphis. And I looked outside and I saw something look very similar to this. And that's in my memory anyway. And so that was my first aurora experience was in 1991. And back then we didn't have cell phones, right? We didn't have forecasting like we do today. So it was a very surreal moment for me. In 2003, this is I think the last major storm before recent years. This one article I found is really interesting, saying that half the satellites try to deorbit, and that seems like a lot. But yeah, so space weather affects things in a lot of different ways. The Gannon storm on May 10th, 2024 was one that I've spent a lot of time thinking about. Okay. And I said you'd say her name again. Here's Dolores. She actually teamed up with me. Tamitha's online. I believe Janelle is said she was going to be online. I haven't seen her name yet. We'll come back to them in a minute for something else. But we all got together and tried to explain how the Gannon storm impacted corn row crop production across the Midwestern United States. This document, the QR code, if you want to read about it, it's on my university website. If you look at those planters we had talked about, and a certain percentage of farmers have planters that were relying upon GPS to be able to plant. Okay? And if you assume that we displaced 4 hours of planting tasks from May 10th to the next day, maybe, or 2 days later, but that pushed back all the other acres like dominoes. So it essentially made you plant a day, 2 days later than you normally would have. Okay. And so we made some assumptions about, May 10th is prime time to plant corn. If you have to push an acre to be planted from May 30 to the next day, maybe June 1st, then you're going to have a yield penalty. It's the reason we plant gardens in a certain time of year, because we wait too long, the yields are lower, the quality is lower. Okay? Well, we did the arithmetic on that, and we think it's somewhere between 53 million and 1.7 billion dollars, but conservative estimates somewhere in the middle, $500 million to $1 billion of lost revenue, lost corn production, just from that one event that slowed farmers down by 4 hours. Okay? A couple of things about that. We grow a lot of corn in the United States. Okay. So it wasn't like a few farms. It was, a lot of farms were affected. And each of those were affected maybe $15,000 to $20,000 for their total revenue for an individual farm. But, Griffin, who cares about corn? We don't really eat that much corn. Well, truth is probably don't. Americans, we drink a lot of corn, high fructose corn syrup. We eat beef that eats field corn. But something that may be more important to us is peanuts, and I'll get to that in a minute. It's not only where. I was talking about the Midwest, and here's some Midwest states, but when is really important. So for corn, the cumulative distributions on the left-hand side of this. So we got percentages on the y-axis, 0 to 100, and months, time on the x-axis. So this is the time of year that these states, each state's a different color, plant corn. And the Gannon storm happened right in the middle. Okay. Illinois, for instance, was 20% behind schedule already, okay, because of too much rain. Look at harvest. Same idea, different states harvest at different times because of latitude differences, maybe competing crops from a financial perspective. Maybe it's more profitable to take care of a higher value crop first. But this is the October 24 storm when it happened, okay? let's take a look at this, but let's superimpose this with the number of days with geomagnetic events. Here, I didn't use 8, I used 7.5. This is the histograms in the background. The chart on the left shows corn progress, the same information on the previous slide. The chart on the right, it is showing us different crops when they're planted and harvested at the national level. Notice anything interesting? If you know anything about geomagnetic events, you may be familiar with the Russell-McPherson effect. Essentially, when the Earth is near an equinox, it is more susceptible to geomagnetic disturbance. The sun can do what the sun wants whenever it wants. It doesn't care what day it is on Earth. But when the sun does have a CME, coronal mass ejection, one of the other phenomenon, the Earth tends to have more geomagnetic events during the equinoxes, okay? March, April, September, October. And these loosely line up with when we plant and harvest crops, okay? So that's something that we're watching from an agricultural perspective. So when is a really big thing here. If we have an event today in February, it's not going to affect farming in the Midwest that much. If it happens in July, it'll affect our sprayers and some other activity. But planting is one of the most sensitive times that we're concerned about. And the Gannon storm was the perfect storm, perfect timing. It happened when we were behind schedule. It was a perfect storm. So peanuts, we all love peanuts. Either peanuts are deadly to us or we love them. One of the two. There's nothing in the middle. So in Georgia, they produce about almost $800 billion peanuts every year. And the value of GNSS systems, not just GNSS, but RTK, the survey grade 1 centimeter sub-inch accuracy, is really important because this image is showing part of the peanut production process of digging. If you didn't know it, peanuts grow in the ground, okay? So we have to dig them up. And we got to know where they are. And if we don't, we can lose money. So the value of RTK to peanut production is $60 million just in Georgia. And the scientists there have estimated that there's 11% penalty if we plant or dig without RTK. Okay? So if RTK is down that day, the farmer has, they need to make a decision. Do they keep going without GPS and take the 11% hit? Or do they wait and take a biological yield penalty for planting too late in the year? So I've got a study that's been in academic review since August, which, yes, it has been a long time. I'm getting a little sweating about this. But when I submitted it, they required a graphical abstract and didn't know what that was. New to me. This is a graphical abstract. This is what I submitted with the paper. Basically, it's a mini poster. Okay? So in Georgia, we think that farmers collectively, not just one of them, but all of them together, if a GNSS had an outage, for RTK, if RTK had an outage, we didn't have the sub-inch accuracy, farmers in Georgia would be willing to pay value of information $20 million just to know when will this outage be over. And across the Southeast, the map on the left, that's where the peanuts are grown, what counties. Collectively, looking at $32 million just to know when the outage would be over. Okay, so that's 5% of the production value. And one of the key things about that is if you look at the meteorology studies in agriculture, they would suggest that terrestrial weather has a 1 to 1.5% value of production for that forecast in meteorology. This space weather GNSS RTK outage nowcast has a 5% of production value, which is almost 4 to 5% greater than for terrestrial weather. And you know how farmers watch the Weather Channel and weather apps religiously. Okay? So it's really important to them. Okay? So what I tell them, well, don't panic. Don't start ripping wires apart. If you look at the website spaceweather.gov and these boxes are red, it's probably not something local that a dealer can help you with. It may be beyond our earth. And if it is, just chill out. Go to or take a late lunch, long lunch, go to a movie, just try to remain calm. But in 2026, if our technology is not working, what do? We get angry. We expect it to work now and all the time. Okay? Moral to the story, Gannon storm was not a once in a lifetime event. So what did we learn from this and what can we do about it? Well, this is where ham radio operators come in, okay? And so I don't know, about a year ago, maybe longer, almost 2 years ago, I crossed paths with someone had a poster at the Space Weather Workshop, so I contacted them. I think she's online here, Janelle Shank, and in doing so, her major professor contacted me and Timothy Scove, and we've been meeting quite a bit. And one of the cool things is, I can't remember what the origin of this decision was, but I'm glad we did it. Janelle built I'm not going to call it a survey. This is a report. So when a user experiences GNSS outage, whether they're a farmer, construction, geocacher, ham radio operator, just someone who's driving to work using Google Maps, all of the above. This is a report that you can tell us where, when, how long, and what were you doing. And for instance, if you click on precision agriculture, it'll ask you more questions. Well, were you using a radio base station? What were you doing? Were you planting? What crop? But the required ones are where, when, how long. Okay. And again, this is the URL across the top. This is our friendly QR code. And I was going to briefly bring it up. Maybe we can see it. This is built with the ESRI platform. It zoomed right into Kansas State University, where I'm at today. You can select personal user, aviation, geological, communications. Okay, are you emergency management? Are you VHF, UHF, HF? What time of day? How long was it? And if you want to send us more information, you can type some stuff in or send us an email. Put some context of what was going on. Then once we get that information, I'm going to go back. I didn't say it. Citizen sciences and crowdsourcing. Right? We're doing this for a public good. Okay. And one, there's a dashboard that this goes to. And two, if someone's interested in looking at anonymized data, they can download it. So right now, this is a screenshot of the dashboard that Janelle built and QR code. If you want to take a look at it, I'll show it to you in a second. When we get this thing populated with actual data, I'm hoping it's going to look like this with a heat map showing us, and we can play it as an animation showing how the outage started, let's say, in the north and worked its way down like the Gannon storm. It started in the United States and North Dakota our first reports, and it moved south. We had some in Kansas, but not as many in Oklahoma. We went down the eastern seaboard to Georgia, so there was a lot of really cool things about what we learned from that storm. And we hope to continue learning by these reports from citizen scientists who will put stuff up. And I said, we're going to anonymize it for the download. And so, for instance, we may use the Maidenhead grid. And so that way, if a user, it'll add a little bit of confidence that we won't disrupt their confidentiality about where they're farming or where their secret aurora photography spot is. We'll aggregate it to something, arbitrarily not too small. And we do have a live version of that up. I'll bring it over. This is it. It's evolving all the time. I think there is a Maidenhead grid built into it now. And we can zoom in. These are my locations in Kansas. If you zoom in too much, then the points go away for confidentiality reasons. There will be a download button so you can get the CSV. And, if you want to look at the data, if you want to publish the data, go for it. This is a public service, citizen scientists putting it together. Janelle, are you out there? I saw Tamitha. Tamitha, are you live? No?
Yes, I'm here.
All right, cool. I'm glad you're here. That's Janelle, and she's with a civil engineering firm, a former student from Millersville University, where Tamitha is on faculty through their SWIN program, Space, Weather, and the Environment. Give a shout out to Tamitha. I saw Tamitha's name on here. She's a ham radio operator. That's her call sign. The Space Weather Woman, .com if you don't know Tamitha. And then I want to give a shout out to the folks at USDA for funding a lot of my research. This project is at University of Georgia. We have a digital data-driven demonstration farm using GPS and RTK for a lot of things. And it's been great because I get to test some things out that far south. So I went really fast for intentionally because I had a lot of content I wanted to talk about, but also wanted to give time for questions, comments, criticisms, discussion. And this is my contact information on the socials. I'm Space Plowboy, so .com, Twitter, X, LinkedIn, whatnot. I've had this handle for almost 20 years. The spaceplowboy@gmail.com.
Hey.
It's me.
Do you want to hold your sir? Yes. I'm just gonna kind of keep looking.
And
Terry,
so,
I had a quick question when you're ready.
yeah, we're ready for questions.
Yeah, Terry, nice talk. Very interesting. I do like your word cloud there. That's kind of cool. When these events hit, let's say the 2024 event, what is the actual impact on the farmers? I mean, do they actually their instruments just simply don't function and say we don't acquire satellites? Is it just the link, the downlink, or is it the impact on the satellite itself that causes this? And I just was curious as to how much of a delay how much of a delay it causes.
Someone has their mic open on an iPhone.
Terry, were you able to hear the question?
Yeah, so in agriculture, for the most part, it's all about position, okay? And so when someone explained it to me by if one of the signals from one of the satellites gets delayed by milliseconds, then our location is no longer accurate. And for agriculture, oddly enough, you wouldn't think of it as being a high precision endeavor, but we're talking about sub-inch accuracy for a lot of things we're doing. Even spreading fertilizer, we're still looking at least a meter resolution, right? So if we're off by more than a meter, it might as well say that thing is not working. If planting is not working at 1 centimeter sub-inch accuracy, then it might as well just not be working. On May 10th, we had some operators who said when they came back and turned around, they could see where they just were, and the machine was saying you need to be over another 10, 20 feet from previous pass. That was the first indication something was going on because the machine doesn't know that it was off. Right? And some of the machines here, if we're in a square field, it's not that big of a deal. But if you're farming triangles and oddly shaped creeks on one side, or even the image in the middle, you can see that there's some triangular, you don't hit the end of the field in at a square. And so there's technology that will actually shut off individual rows of the equipment once it comes back to the location of where it's already planted seed or sprayed. We call that automated section control. That technology is completely inoperative without a strong GPS signal. Does that kind of address, Bob, what you were asking
Yeah.
about? Or
And just curious as how much delay it would cause them. Do they have to stop for the day or wait?
oh,
We're just curious on that.
well, so on May 10th, this is the first time we actually had something that happened during a time critical period across a large portion of the country. It was a 4-hour delay in West Kansas, probably longer in North Dakota, maybe not as long in Georgia. But in Georgia, our RTK towers were having problems for 2 days. It wasn't continually being down, but on the 11th and 12th, they were having some sporadic issues.
Well, thank you very much, Terry.
Terry, this is David N1HAC. One question I have is if they considered using dual carrier GPS, which would
Yeah.
avoid a lot of these problems.
So the older base stations sometimes are kept because farmers spend a small fortune to buy those. And even if they have new tractors or new receivers, the old station is the weak link. Okay. But going back to what you just asked, I'm going to try to be an analog Tamitha because I heard her say this. Sometimes if you're at the fringe between no disturbance on the ground and disturbance, you may be worse off with more signals. Tamitha, is that somewhat true?
She's saying her mic isn't working, unfortunately.
Really? Huh. I bet she'll put something in the chat though. She said yes. So the answer is kind of it depends. Newer technology is better than older technology, but sometimes it can trip you up if you're right at that. If you look through a glass of water at something and the part that goes through the water gets bent, well, that's kind of how the ionosphere treats when it gets dense. It acts like a lens, and it bends some of the signals coming from GPS satellites. There is technology that a lot of the companies have put out that correct for ionospheric disturbances. And one of the catchphrases I saw was, "We tested this during solar cycle 24." But then that's where I go, excuse me, solar cycle 24 was probably not the best testing ground for this technology. So we'll see. And then all of us are very hopeful that the next generation of guidance, I hear the word quantum guidance once in a while, that may not need satellite signals would be the answer, but I don't know if that would be anywhere close to being ready by, solar cycle 26 or even 27.
Hey, Terry.
Yes.
Yeah, this is Ron, KF7ZN. So you probably already know this, and this was some things that I did in collaboration with Tamitha. But at the beginning of the Gannon in May, John Deere did not know what was going on. They sent out information saying, we're seeing it across our entire service area. We're currently trying to determine a resolution. And then an hour and a half later, they started talking about space weather. And then later they said, just turn the RTK off. And I've presented on this, but it's interesting how one hand did not know what the other one was doing, and how the corporate side of corporations like John Deere had no idea, which you would think they would if they've put out this device and they're using GPS, they're involved with the satellites, that they would have had an understanding of what could affect it. But their information that they were sending out was that they were, for want of a better term, clueless of what was going on.
Yeah, so this is a local ownership landmark implement here in Marysville, Kansas. And so, this is what you're describing. Friday, May 10th, 5 p.m. We're seeing GPS issues across the entire service area and basically saying, we have no idea why. And then, 90 minutes later, sunspots. We had no idea. And, we're sorry for the inconvenience. And so we saw that play out, and you're exactly right. The local dealerships were not informed. It didn't sound like. And a lot of people didn't see this was coming, even those who knew it could. And after the event, a lot of them were saying, this is a once in a lifetime event. Hasn't happened before. It's never going to happen again. And we know that's not true now, because we've seen in October 2024, we had some more, not to the degree in May, but yeah, no, Ron, that was an excellent point.
Yeah, and it's interesting that the information going out to the dealers came from the corporate headquarters, where maybe I'm assuming too much, but I would think if I'm spending a fortune in selling something to somebody, that I would understand some of the ramifications of what can mess it up. It was also quite interesting. After Tamitha got me started in this direction, I did a bunch of other stuff. How information going to the individual farmers was anything from scattered to incomplete to completely erroneous. This stuff in here about where they talk about how it's the worst since 2005. Honestly, that shows kind of a complete lack of understanding of what's going on, or the solar cycles, or when we've had storms. I mean, we had the 1859 Carrington, we had the 1920 with its issues. We had the one, like you mentioned, in 72, where we had 4,000 mines go off, et cetera, et cetera. So I was kind of amazed at the lack of understanding of their product. Anyway, nice presentation. Thanks.
Appreciate that, Ron. Yeah, it's very interesting.
Can you guys?
I heard someone started talking. It sounded a lot like Tamitha.
It was Tamitha. We only heard the last first words. And
can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, we heard that.
Okay, good. Good. You can hear me. Good. You can hear me, because I joined by phone because I couldn't get my camera. I don't know why my computer decided not to work on Zoom. It usually is rock solid, so this is kind of strange. Anyway, I do want to mention that there have been, I don't want to sell farmers short, because there have been precision agriculture early adopters who, back in cycle 24, would anecdotally report on social media. But it was few and far between. It would be a long-standing storm. It would be when there was, extraneous, other circumstances, where the weather was bad, or when they could only get locks on satellites that were low on the horizon. And as I kind of dug into this a little bit a long time ago, what I found was that a lot of Canadian farmers ended up completely getting rid of GPS in GNSS farming. They don't rely on it nearly like the United States does. And part of the reason for that is because they had so many more outages. It just wasn't reliable for them. And you would expect that for two reasons. One, of course, is because they get aurora a lot more frequently. The other is because the GNSS satellites, as you might recognize, they only go up to certain latitudes, and then the satellites are no longer covering the entire sky. As you get up above 40 degrees north and south latitude, what ends up happening is that the satellites no longer fill the entire sky. There ends up being this hole. And so the satellites begin to fill less and less of the sky. And so pretty soon, all of the satellites will be on one side of the horizon, one side of the sky, on one side of zenith. And when you do that, you end up really getting larger errors, what we call dilution of precision in the geometric factor, even before you even consider any type of space weather impact. So precision agriculturists in Canada have a much tougher time. They're not in the Goldilocks zone like we are here in the United States, which I think is part and parcel of why it's kind of bitten a lot of people in the backside, pardon my language, during this particular cycle, is that we just have lived in the Goldilocks zone. We take so much for granted, where there are lots of other parts of the world that have a much, much tougher time with GNSS services. Brazil is another location that just after 9 p.m. on a summer evening, GPS just doesn't work. because of all the plasma bubbles down there. So it's something that's a mid-latitude. I think it's a mid-latitude complacency, if I may coin the phrase. And it's something that is very unique to us.
It's interesting you bring that up, Tamitha, because a lot of us live above 40 degrees and we do have diluted GPS coverage. And a lot of the winter wheat, for instance, is above 40 degrees latitude and it's going north.
Very interesting. What would be neat would be to get farmers, precision agriculturists together from different areas and really talk about what are the gotchas in these different regions, because that's one of the interesting things about GNSS services is that it really folds in the topology of the land. It folds in, network availability. It folds in a lot of terrestrial aspects. It's not just a space weather phenomenon. And so different people in different areas, this is one of the reasons why GIS is such an amazing tool, because you can fold in all this aggregate data from totally disparate sources and be able to really start kind of diving in to find out exactly where the problem areas are going to be for GNSS services. And that may or may not be places that you would expect. So.
Another thing that has happened is that they shut down the LORAN system, which is a much more robust navigation system. And eLORAN was going to be very similar accuracy to GPS and could have run through this. But, all of this was developed during a very weak solar cycle, and they didn't realize the susceptibility. But hopefully, I'm hoping that we can get our eLORAN system back. It's been funded, but
there
isn't
is
built
serious
out.
talk, David, about trying to turn it back on again.
Yes, I know. I'm very well aware of that. I hope they do, because it will fill in these holes much, very nicely.
One thing that we think about is autonomy. So if we don't need a person and a tractor, we can have swarms. And sometimes we don't need a big tractor. Sometimes we just could use small robots roaming the field. And if you think of those as in modules, such that there's like a big trailer and we have modules of robots inside that trailer. Well, we could set up a temporary triangulation system, and which would act like a mini localized GPS for that particular field. And then once we move the robots to the next field, that thing goes with them. Basically it's the motherships that carry the swarm. So it wouldn't be it'd be basically line of sight communications.
Hey, Terry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Ron again. Just one more thing. I just wanted to give a shout out to the work that like what you're doing. I know that Tamitha has really done a nice job of bringing in the science side with the agriculture. I know some of the work that Tamitha has been doing, trying to educate and to do this. And so I think this is a big deal, and I really appreciate what all of you are doing with it.
Oh, it's been a lot of fun, but yeah, thank you, Ron.
Yeah, let me break in. Actually, Ron, I appreciate you saying that. One of the questions, I guess, if you don't mind, Terry, I'd like to ask a question of the group. One of the questions I have really is, I know a lot of folks in HamSCI, you guys have been focusing very much on the personal space weather station, and I know that data is still being stored on hard drives. Jerry Ryan has kind of kept me up to date with what you guys are doing, so I appreciate Jerry. He's kind of helps be my liaison for HamSCI when I'm not able to attend as much as I'd like. But I know you guys work very much on the eclipses, and that's kind of focused a lot of attention away, sadly, from the Gannon storm and possibly the October storm, that happened, and the November storm that happened just recently. I mean, these near G5 misses, so to speak. And I'm curious for two different things. One is, what are the chances that anyone's going to really start working on the ionospheric disturbances during the Gannon storm so that we can start having comparisons with GNSS outages like we have here, at least over CONUS, or at least over the the North American continent. And then secondly, what do you think the chances are that we could get ham radio citizen scientists as well as Aurora photographers to, maybe from the Aurora source, to start contributing and thinking in terms of GPS and GNSS outages and contributing to a citizen science driven GNSS outage map like what K-State's, what we're kind of working and still building? What do you guys think?
Tamitha, I can chime in on that. We've got a citizen science initiative that I'm actually going to be talking about at the HamSCI workshop. It's in conjunction with the Cinema NASA mission, which will be 9 spacecraft in low Earth orbit, studying the Earth's magnetic tail. But our citizen science initiative is called MOVIE, and it is, I believe, supposed to include GPS dual carrier receivers for citizen science deployment. And this is exactly what I think you're talking about.
Yeah, it is. What are the chances that maybe we can all, how we could help find some synergy between what we're doing and what you guys are doing with that particular campaign?
I would say very good.
Okay.
Well,
okay. Let me know who do I get in touch with?
Well,
who does Terry and I get in touch with?
Yeah. Well, Mike Hardinger is the lead on it, but I'm involved, and actually Nathaniel and Christina are involved with this as well.
Okay. Thank you.
So I'm hoping that it will include, definitions of what's in the personal space weather station.
Yeah, be really good. Thank you for that.
The other comment I'd make, Tamitha, is Nathaniel has one of his undergrad students working on her physics thesis or undergraduate thesis specifically on the Gannon storm. So that's a small start, but it is a start and moving in the right direction.
Thank you. I had heard whispers of that, but didn't know if that had really taken hold or not.
And Rebecca will have a poster about this at the HamSCI workshop.
I take it Rebecca that's the grad student we're talking about.
No, she's a senior physics major.
Oh, got it. Oh, okay, undergrad. Right, Scranton. Thank you. Appreciate that, Marilla.
All right, this has been a fascinating presentation, and I've got some ideas of where I want to store it and make it accessible to the HamSCI community. But before I talk about that, any other questions for Terry?
Yes, I do have a question for Terry. This is Kukai from Scranton. Can you hear me?
I can.
I'm good, Kukai, yes.
Yeah, it's very interesting to hear that with the RTKs have increased the production value for like more than 11%. That's a lot. My question is that, how to say, I want to know that how large of the positioning error is acceptable. I believe it's in centimeter level requirement, but I want to know like how many centimeter.
So depends on the activity. For planting and digging peanuts, peanuts specifically, we're talking about less than 2 inch.
2 inches. Wow.
Yeah. And if it's greater than 2 inches, the problem is peanuts get planted in the ground and they become these viney looking things. And we can't really see where the center of that row is once they're viney. And to dig them without having physical loss, we need to know exactly where they were planted. If we're off 2 inches from that center line of planting, we lose 11%. For corn, we're a little bit more flexible. But the thing is, we sometimes will plant with a, let's say, a 16-row planter and harvest with a 12-row harvester. And if we have really wide or really narrow middles in between, then we're not able to harvest in a efficient manner because that we call it a wide middle or narrow middle. It'll keep us from being able to harvest. And so that's about a 4 inch
Wow. But 2 inches requirement for peanut is quite critical. That's
It is.
why
Mhm.
that's why even the storm affect it a lot. And well, another question is that does the RTK-based plantation cropping, those kind of agricultural thing done only in daytime?
No, because of GPS, we don't have to rely upon a visual guidance. We can plant and harvest in the dusty conditions, middle of the night. And that was one of the selling points was, we're no longer at a 14 to 16 hour a day work day. We can work 20, we can get the machine to be moving 22 plus hours a day. It has its own downtime, but so a lot of these things will happen at nighttime. And so if you're interested in, twilight effects of atmospheric scintillation, then we do have some things here that would be of interest.
Yeah, I asked because in mid-latitude, it would be like, okay. But if we go down to the low latitude where the plasma bubble exists, at nighttime, the positioning error would be much larger, especially for the one single frequency uses like RTK technology.
Yeah, so because of GPS, we farm at nighttime now. When I was a kid in the 1980s, the farm machinery headlights were so bad that they were basically just there for people to be able to see you, and it didn't really help you to see what was around the equipment.
So now it's a kind of like a best case scenario that with RTK technology, we can have more than 11% of the production value add. Wow.
Yes.
Very interesting. Okay, thank you so much.
And that's a well-documented number. So if you're really interested in what you were just asking about, this is the working paper that when I submitted it, the journal put it up on SSRN. So if you scan that QR code, you can see the initial draft of that paper that I hope will be published sometime this year.
Yeah, it's very interesting and I will check it out. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been great to be here. I'm glad Tamitha connected with Nathaniel and Gary. Janelle's out there somewhere. Thank both of you for, so we did this together, right? We have something I think we're going to be very proud of in the HamSCI community. Really would love your opinions on how to make it better, but also your not only your participation, but helping us get the word out that this tool exists and to get it out to more people that maybe can report GNSS outages.
Yeah, I'll definitely. Well, of course, I do want to make your paper available to the HamSCI community, and we have kind of sort of a page dedicated to education, and I almost think this is where it belongs. When we started earlier, why are we studying space weather? The economic impacts you've described here are immense. I mean, I think most people realize, farming has become an industrialized process. It's been that way for decades. When you talk about 2 inches and 4 inches and 11 centimeters, that type of accuracy being a requirement now to maximize yields is just phenomenal. So anyhow, I think that's where this thing really belongs. And then, like I say, we can definitely promote it to the community.
So at the Space Weather Workshop last March, 11 months ago, a gentleman from the Space Force walked up to me and wanted to talk about this because food security is one thing that we want to maintain not only domestically, but around the world to keep civilizations from destabilizing. So, global food security adds a layer to that. And peanuts are a prime example of a protein source.
So I guess maybe the last comment I would have is sort of a take action type of thing. The politicians in the United States right now many seem to have an anti-science bent, and they're not too interested in funding basic research and advanced research and so on and so forth. But when it comes to our GPS systems are aging, should they be replaced? Should they be replaced with or supplemented with Loran E and that sort of thing? Unfortunately, the people making these decisions really don't understand probably what the implications are. But I think anyone that has a chance to contact their representatives, at least in the U.S. Congress, and say, hey, you quit arguing about stupid stuff and start thinking about how we're funding our future ability to maintain and raise crops and send them around the world as we do for reasons Terry just mentioned. So that's my political comment that I'm done. All right, it's a few minutes after 5. I think we've had obviously, Terry, again, thank you, and Janelle, and of course, Tamitha, too, for contributing to this and for getting us together. And hopefully, especially as David mentioned, something good, more will come from it than just a presentation and a little bit of education. We can begin working together at some point. And obviously, there's synergy and more eyeballs on the problem, so to speak. So, all right, does anyone have any closing comments, or we'll call it a week this week?
Thank you very much. That was just fascinating. My degree's in economics, not physics or engineering. So thank you.
Thank all of you. Welcome.
All right, everyone. Have a great week. I'm not sure. Our next speaker technically would be like a day or so before the workshop. So I'm not sure if we're going to have one or we're going to have just an open net that week. But we'll figure it out in the next month and advertise accordingly. So thanks, everyone. Have a great week, and if you're in Orlando, stop by at HamSCIence and look for our booth.
Okay.
All right, 73, everyone.
Thank you very much.
73.
73.